Welcome to our Mindful Sex monthly workshops. I have been teaching these for almost 2 years now as a way to allow people to kind of drop in to this beautiful conversation about more mindful or conscious sexuality. And today we're going to be talking about relationship medicine, which is how do we heal trauma and also explore growth and expansion in partnership. Again, a lot of this is built on our shared experience in this work with clients, with groups, with students, and it's also based on our own work together as two people in partnership. So as we were building out the content for this workshop, we realized that our work together kind of encapsulates all of the content of this workshop, which is to say that Christopher, with 20 plus years as a psychotherapist and sex therapist, really helps people focus on healing, right? And we'll talk more about what exactly that looks like. But he helps people heal from trauma, get to baseline mental health, restore relationships using the work of the Gottman Institute and Esther Perel and other therapy superstars. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. So his work really focuses on helping us find new ways of healing within partnership. As a sex coach, my work is a little bit different and it's more focused on expansion, right? So I don't work with folks that have mental health challenges. I don't work with folks who are really in big trouble. I work with people who are doing pretty good, who want to figure out how to expand and explore. So my work with hundreds of individuals and couples and students and clients uses tools from Tantra and mindfulness and yoga to help explore what else is possible when we're on a little bit more of a growth path, right? So we have healing kind of in this therapeutic context and growth in this coaching context. So that's going to be how we're going to frame up the workshop today. And no matter where you are, whether you are single or partnered or poly, and no matter where your relationship is, if you're in partnership, some of you may be in the healing phase where you're still working on some stuff or still struggling with some things. Some of you may be in the expansion phase where you're like, great, we found our person, I've done the work, I've been to therapy. How do we figure out what's next for us, for our bodies, for our pleasure, for our sex, for our partnership? So that is the framework for our workshop today. And before we get too deep, I want to do an intro to me. There's a lot of new names on the call, so thank you as always for the new folks that found me. I would love for you to drop into the chat where you are in the world. I put my work in a bunch of different places, and it's always super fun to know how people find me and how people find this work. So where you are in the world and how you found me is always super helpful. So if you want to drop that into the chat, that would be awesome. So again, for those of you that don't know me, I work as a holistic pleasure coach and sex educator. Sex educator is the official designation and what I'm technically certified in. Pleasure coach is a little bit more broad. And so what that means is that I use holistic practices combined with science-backed research, kind of like a Venn diagram of like esoteric and magical, but also scientific and practical. This work is ancient and intuitive, and it's also practical and realistic that you can apply right away. Sexual wellness, as I teach it, coach it, and live it, is really a foundation for being our best selves. It's just as valuable as our mental health, as our emotional health, as our physical health, our sleep score, and all that stuff. Sexual wellness is part of our overall wellness and can be part of our healing pathway, right? So my work helps you find sacred spaces, helps you slow down your pleasure, help you find magical connection with yourself and with others. And I do this through individual and couples coaching, through events, online and in person, and by holding sacred spaces, including this one that we do every month. So I'm going to drop a couple of links in the chat. This is our next month's event where we will be doing, hold on. There we go. This is our next month event where we'll be doing some live guided practices. For those of you that are on the growth path, then you can dive into our free workshop next month and come hang out with us again for another couple hours and learn more about how we get a little bit deeper together. And I want to turn it over to my beloved to introduce himself and his work.
I think that's my cue. I'm going to do my intro a little bit different if we have a frequent flyer in the audience. This is a little bit of new information about me. So, I'm Christopher Brown. I have been a human all my life and a therapist almost half of that time now. And in my journey from this healing to expansion, here's how I would give you my identity when I was in the healing phase. I used to say this to support groups I ran all the time for depression and bipolar disorder. Hi, my name is Christopher Brown. My diagnosis today is major depressive disorder in remission. My diagnoses used to be major depressive disorder recurrent, generalized anxiety disorder, alcohol abuse, and dependent personality disorder. Again, to repeat for all of you, my diagnosis today, and still today to this day, is major depressive disorder in remission. That's it. And then once I got to that healing phase with the help of a lot of really great helping professionals, I started wondering, okay, what do you do after you're in recovery? And that led me to how I would identify today as a tantric practitioner, a sex therapist, a human who is polyamorous and very much in love. And so, yeah, there is a lot more for all of you on the call. If you're still in your healing phase, and look, I had a depressive day yesterday. So sometimes, pain doesn't abandon us just because we get into recovery. But for those of you who are recovering, recovery is possible and expansion lies beyond. So that's me, and I'm happy to answer any questions about my journey, and I will certainly add my professional experience as we go today. Andrea, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, love. Thank you for everyone for dropping in your stuff into the chat. It's so nice to see that we have all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast covered. And again, I love hearing where people find me. It helps me know where to continue my marketing efforts. So thank you for that. So again, today we're going to be talking about, I know there were a couple people that just dropped in. So we're going to be talking about what we call relationship medicine, which is our phrase of looking at relationships through a lens of healing and growth. These are not necessarily separate, right? There's obviously going to be some overlap in how we talk about stuff. There's been overlap in our own healing and growth journeys, maybe in your own as well. And as we think about this, like I really want to offer this as kind of a different paradigm for building relationships, right? So as a coach and as a therapist, we don't see people in our practice who are like doing great, right? Like usually there's some sort of challenge that they're working through. And in my experience, and Christopher, I definitely want you to speak to this. I think a lot of it comes from the fact that, when we're dating, especially when we're younger, for people that have been in partnerships since their teens or 20s, it's not always about like this growth path, right? It's like, are you hot? Like, are we sexy together? Do we want to start a family together? Are we compatible? Maybe you have conversations about money or kids and family values and things like that, religion, perhaps. But a lot of people don't even have those baseline conversations. And then we end up in partnerships together that maybe we feel a little stuck, or we feel frustrated, or we feel last month we taught about sexless partnerships, and maybe you have a partnership where it feels like, oh, this isn't the type of sex I want to be having, or we're not having sex at all, right? So if we don't kind of start from the ground up having those conversations, we may find ourselves stuck. Not always, but often. And also that this is not necessarily for everyone. Like there are some people who are very much like, and I think Christopher and I are part of it, and probably all of you, since you're here, are kind of on this path of like, what's new? Like, what's possible? Where's this expansion? Like, how can I learn this? How can I keep growing as a human and in partnership? And some people are not. I always think about my parents in this context, from whom I'm estranged because they don't speak to me. They don't want to grow. They don't want to go to therapy. They don't want to try psychedelics. They don't want to read books to learn about, for example, emotionally unavailable parents, right? Like they don't have that kind of mindset of growth. And if, again, you're all here, so presumably you do, but I'm sure you know people and probably know couples in your life who don't have that. that is fine. This is not meant to be a value judgment on how people choose to live. But what I see happen sometimes is that one person in a partnership kind of gets that trajectory of growth and the other person doesn't. And then we get stuck in some of the other stuff that we experience. So, Christopher, I want to open it up to you because I feel like that I'm sure you have a lot to say about this.
Yeah, so to kind of stick with the theme of today, we're talking about relationships as medicine, right? And one of the things, Andrea's right. Nobody comes into my practice to brag about how great things are going. People come to see me when they are stuck or there has been a real wound that requires healing. And frankly, a lot of people come to me from the relationship standpoint when it's like the last ditch effort. And sometimes the last ditch effort is checking the box to say we did it to ourselves and other people before we have already decided that this thing is over. So, to kind of set a few frameworks, I always feel like I'm the framework guy to try to give us ways to think about the content you're hearing. And I work with a lot of polyam folks. I'm polyam myself, so this model doesn't fit for everybody, but I got two hands and putting my feet on screen is not anything anybody needs. So I'm just going to go with a dyad for now. When I work with relationships, I think of them, and this thing they create together. And sometimes there's more than two, right? So a lot of times when we're talking about relationship medicine, we're talking about one, from my standpoint, how do I give medicine to this third thing, this relationship that needs recovery itself, that needs healing itself, or that really is stuck, like Andrea says. And so stuckness comes a lot in the kind of work I see when people make life choices, oftentimes by default, right? Because society says I'm supposed to couple up, I'm supposed to then, date exclusively. Then I'm supposed to be social media exclusive. Then I'm supposed to get engaged. Then I'm supposed to get married. Then I'm supposed to have kids. And, we're transgressively kind of playing with the order of those steps a little bit in today's culture, which is kind of fun to see. I mean, like, I love the baby mama, baby daddy tags because it gives us some other alternative role outside of that progression, but largely the steps are the same. Most of us we're being really transgressive if we mix up the steps. We can still get stuck if I'm defaulting to that script in any order. What I'll often see in my practice with my longtime co-parents is they come to me when the kids have launched and they look back and they have broadened their lives by having, kids, and then the kids' friends become their friends and everything else. But once the kids are gone, what they realize is they didn't deepen their connection with each other. And I'm sort of agnostic. Like, not everybody has to go deep with their partners. But I will say, if people don't go deep and they broaden, when life happens, should we all be, living long enough to, have that blessing, right? You may find yourself looking up at that partner after a while and saying, okay, who are you? And do I want to do this next stage of life with you? Right? So this is really, how do we do healing? And then how do we deepen in the relationship? That's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. So with that, Andrea, back to you.
Yeah, I think about Esther Perel's famous comment. We were just at a workshop of hers last weekend, along with another person on this call, which I love.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she says about her partnership of, I think, 40 years was, I've been married 3 times, all to the same person, right? So this idea that we meet at whatever age we meet and we stay the same throughout our lifespan is not really how most of us are going to thrive, right? It's possible, right? And again, I think about my parents who've been married for 46 years who are miserable, right? Because they haven't done that kind of work to expand, grow, get to know each other, get to know themselves, right? So, yeah, my hope is that I get to, continually grow in partnership. We talk about our marriage as a container for growth. And so for us, this is exactly what we're speaking to is how do we deepen together so that we don't wake up one day and don't know each other, right? So that we kind of always have a sense of kind of where we are and what's going on. And we did this little exercise the other day where it's like, well, what is the biggest problem that you're stressed about right now, right? Like, that's important to know. So the rest of the kind of lecture, we've broken it into 3 different sections. So one, we're gonna, yes, darling.
Admin question quickly.
Yes.
Do you want to admit a Zoom user with no user ID, with an anonymous ID?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had some challenges. Being a woman on the internet who talks about sex means I've had some stalkers, I've had some people who don't follow the rules, and some other stuff. So Christopher's always being cautious, which I appreciate. So we have broken this down, and I feel like with these workshops, we could talk for fucking like 8 hours about each of these topics, right? So again, think of these as kind of like an intro to all of it, and to go deeper, great, that's possible too. You just have to pay us. Um, so in the next kind of bit of the workshop, we're going to talk about medicine for healing and medicine for growth. We're going to talk about conversations for healing, conversations for growth. And then we're going to talk about practices for healing and practices for growth. And generally, he will take kind of the healing side of the conversation, and I will take a little bit more of the growth side of the conversation. So as we think about medicine, we're going to think about medicine really broadly here, right? And again, this kind of shows our different approaches to things. For Christopher, medicine has historically meant one thing, and for me, it means something really different. So we'll talk about that. So Christopher, I'd love for you to start with this idea of, when we think about people who are starting their healing journey or are on their healing journey, and we talk about like what medicines do people really benefit from, where would we start?
Okay. Now, y'all remember the basic framework, right? They, and them, right? So they, if I wanted to switch it, and this thing they build together. So first, I'm going to talk about medicine for the individuals. And I feel like this is more important for me to say now than it was 20 years ago, because we have a current director of health of human services who is promoting a lot of disinformation about medicine, literal medicine. And so I'll tell you, and again, I led off with my diagnostic identity from back in the day. Y'all, I didn't wait to get into remission before I was in relationship. I was depressed and anxious and dependent, were probably the biggest factor to remember, while actively in relationship. And so that is going to be the path for most of us. We humans are built to be we're relational creatures. We're built to be in relationship. So one of the pet peeves I have about like dating advice and kind of social media advice that you see out there is, girl, take some time for yourself before you jump into relationship. Or, guy, you really better heal before you jump into another one. Okay, there's a little bit of a healing work you can do solo. For example, just to use myself as an example, to treat my depression, once upon a time, I used an SSRI, a straight antidepressant. A lot of people who come into my practice, this isn't my diagnostic picture, but they will come in and seek therapy when they're depressed. They'll go, I'll refer, I'm not a prescriber, so I'll refer to a psychiatrist for medication. They'll come in, present depressed, and they'll get an antidepressant like I did. And then sometimes, not all the time, it'll flip that person from depressed into mania. That indicates a bipolar picture diagnostically that then requires a different class of medication called a mood stabilizer. The other thing you'll see individually in terms of medication is you'll think of thought glue, which is a lot nicer way of saying an antipsychotic medication. So if I have problems with the way my thinking works, meaning I literally go A to B to X in this relational way that somebody like me, who has a little bit of an abstract brain, can follow, but really is hard in sort of typical Western society, which promotes rational thought. Sometimes we need a little thought glue to go to A to B to C to D to E, right? Instead of just A to B to X. So there's the thought glue antipsychotics. Then finally, you have medications for focus, which is attention deficit disorders. They're stimulants and non-stimulants. So those are literal medicines for the individual. And then what I would say is that if I'm, as I was, in dependent personality disorder, I was never going to get in recovery from that particular personality disorder single. I had to be in relationship as the crucible, the medicine itself, to be able to heal that part of me. Now, what I will say, and this is the one bit of dating advice that I ever give anybody on these calls or in these seminars and also in my practice, if you run up against someone who is allergic to personal responsibility, big red flag. Big red flag. Because one of the things that happened to me is I was in my healing relationships is that I found people who were often allergic to personal responsibility, and I became hyper responsible. So the last thing I will say is as you're doing your individual healing in the context of relationship, by definition, if there are two of you, and sometimes there's more than two, but if there are only two of you, you're only responsible for half. You're only responsible for half of what this is, right? So those are my tips for relationship as medicine as you're doing your own healing. Andrea, anything you want me to add to that, or is that enough?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we talked about during our, kind of brainstorming about this was that therapy itself can be part of the healing relationship, can be part of the medicine, right? Especially if we're dealing with trauma, attachment wounds, things like that. Like coming to the same place or the same Zoom room, see the art behind him that was specifically designed to create a same space for his online clients during pandemic. Like that in and of itself is healing. And I think, I hadn't really thought about therapy like that before. I think, oh, therapy is where I go and I get to like talk about stuff, but to really understand it as like, you're the same person I see every week. This is why it's so important. Like you are a secure attachment. Like I think that, can you talk about that a little bit?
I can. So attachment wounds are often what get healed in a long-term psychotherapy. So psychotherapy is a relationship designed to be healing, and then it is designed to end. Right. So psychotherapy by its creation is not meant to be an expansive growth relationship. It's designed to be healing. So once you heal from your attachment wounds, usually, and so what I'm talking about with attachment wounds is one lens of psychotherapy, which is attachment theory, which has got a lot of traction in the pandemic on social media. Basically, what attachment is, in a really quick, overly simplified primer, as children, as human children, we have to attach to the adults around us to survive. We're not one of those species that the young are born independent, right, and capable of survival. So we have to attach to the adults around, no matter what state their healing journey is in, right? So we need to attach either securely or insecurely, whatever those adults require, you have to attach that way. So then you carry that baseline attachment, either secure or insecure, into your adult relationships. So in childhood, attachment is designed to help us literally survive. In adulthood, attachment and the goal of attachment in our attachment systems change. The goal of attachment in adulthood is to become our own secure attachment object, right? So then we, as securely attached baseline humans, can go seek out connection with others. Right now, a lot of people don't do that work. They just go into the world with attachment wounds and they keep connecting insecurely. Hello, I'm an example of that. They keep connecting insecurely to people and then acting out in adulthood the attachment style they necessarily had to have as children. Okay, well, I don't want to say never. That mostly doesn't go well, right? And so that's where people come to me, right? Because, oh, I'm acting out these attachment wounds in adulthood, and why isn't this working for me? It worked when I was a kid. It helped me survive, but it's not working in adulthood with this other person who may be doing their version of the same thing. So here we go. And this is where we got to heal there. So there's the attachment wounding. And yeah, to be clear, Andrew's exactly right. The gold standard of treatment for major depressive disorder was medication, antidepressants, not a mood stabilizer, that's for that bipolar class, and therapy, right? It was both and. And in our country, in the US, we, kind of got on the medication train, but less the therapy train. But still, the medical folks that will look at these, largely human-made disorders, but it's tracking with what we're seeing in our offices, right? Um, they will almost always advocate a healing relationship plus literal medicine that I put in my mouth. Okay.
So as I think about my own kind of healing journey, which has been kind of both expansion focused and healing focused, right? It did not start with therapy. It did not start with medicines. I haven't had any of the kind of mental health challenges that Christopher has spoken about in his own past. What I started with was actually body-based stuff. So I've been a yogi for 25 years. And while the first like 10 years or so was really just about like balancing out my stiff shoulders from surfing and also just like trying to be super hot, it became, and I began to understand it as a healing practice, right? For those of you that don't have a background in yoga, you may not know that yoga is not the end all be all. Like yoga is just part of a very dynamic practice. And yoga is the practices that you do to get the energy out and settle your mind, body, and spirit to be in meditation, right? Yoga is not just the one thing. It is part of these eight limbs of living and also all these practices, right? So for me, starting to understand yoga as a healing practice, yoga as a spiritual practice, that was really kind of the entry point for me. And I didn't grow up religious, and because I didn't have, the kind of therapeutic pharmaceutical background, like that was my entry point. And through that, I found things like sound healing, breath work, meditation, mindfulness practices. These are the things that, as we were again brainstorming for this, I really thought, oh, this is my kind of healing journey, and that's how I've always talked about it. And Christopher reflected back, like, actually, this is really an expansive mindset, right? It's not like, how do I fix something that's wrong? It's how do I feel more, be bigger, think more broadly, feel more. And along the way, there was a lot of healing to be done. It also helps to partner up with a therapist because there's a lot of healing there. Yes, love.
And here's the therapeutic question. So, Andrea, for you, and feel free to pass on this. And y'all, if you see any therapist or anybody with a bunch of letters after the name, just because they ask you a question doesn't mean you're obligated to answer. So, Andrea, same rule for you. You don't have to answer just because I'm saying it, but you've mentioned your folks a couple of times today. And again, you said you didn't have those individual challenges. As you think about your history now, you didn't have those mental health challenges. Would you say you had those attachment wounds, though?
Yes, totally. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like, working through my parental stuff is like a whole separate workshop. But yeah, like feeling very insecure with a mentally unstable, alcoholic, kind of textbook narcissist parent meant that I felt like I was on eggshells all the time, right? And that I could never do anything right, and that there was always something wrong. So this led to people pleasing, dismissing my own needs and desires and wants. It meant kind of this constant like doubting of myself. So part of this healing has been understanding some of the attachment stuff. Working with therapy, Daddy has been pretty awesome for that. Um, but also exploring all these other healing pathways along the way to really learn to trust myself, to trust my body, to trust my intuition, to notice and self reflect, take some of that personal responsibility about when I'm behaving in a certain way or when there's old habits showing up or realizing when I'm externalizing and projecting instead of like owning it. Yes.
So, y'all, what she's giving us is a beautiful lived example of what it is in real life to be your own secure attachment object, right? You hear how she did it, right? She found these modalities to do all those things she just said, coming from the attachment wound position she was, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about be your own secure attachment object. Andrea, bravo. Like that's it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. The other thing that's a really important medicine as part of my healing journey and so many other people's healing journey is psychedelics and entheogenic medicines more broadly, right? So the classic psychedelics are mushrooms and LSD. MDMA and ketamine are sometimes lumped in with that, which have very different effects and are not classically psychedelic in that same way, but offer really profound healing opportunities. And more research shows that ketamine and MDMA and psilocybin and mushrooms and LSD are actually therapeutic medicines also that can help with PTSD and anxiety and depression and all of that. And that's again beyond the scope of this workshop. But for me, understanding and diving into psychedelics helped me better understand myself, my psyche, my spirituality, and have been a really important part of my healing journey. They are not for everybody. I do not think it's a panacea, but they're pretty fucking great. Um, I did a ketamine experience a couple of months ago, and it was one of the saddest, deepest experiences I've ever had. And then it felt like it was like like any 80s babies will know that if you played Mario, you go from like little Mario to big Mario, right? It's like I had all of this power because I felt like I got rid of kind of this like psycho-spiritual gunk. So all that to say, it's really powerful stuff. And one more thing, and then I'll turn it over to you. The other part of this, and this is some of the stuff that I would recommend to my clients too, right? Yes, psychedelic medicines, maybe therapeutic medicines like SSRIs and things like that, but also starting in the body, right? Whether that's yoga, breathing, martial arts, Tai Chi, literally just going for a walk or putting your feet in the grass, doing body work, getting massages, all of that stuff helps you know your body, helps you trust your body, and helps you practice a really powerful sense of embodied consent, self consent. And all of that can be part of the medicine as you continue to grow as a human. And especially in partnership, the more you know about yourself and the more you can feel yourself, the better you're going to be in partnership. Christopher.
Okay, so let me take y'all back out to them and they, right? The people the individuals in the relationship and then this thing they create. And Andrea's mirroring for us the very thing we talked about at the beginning is as individuals, we can broaden. I can go all the time and take up new projects and new things and be this novelty seeking machine, right? And I will have a broad experience of myself in the world. But she's talking about another path. Broadening isn't bad. I'm not here to say one is better than the other. A different path is to go deeper within the self, right? So she's talking about her experience of psychedelics as a way to get deeper in her own self knowledge. Okay, so that person's going to come to relationship as somebody who likes to go deep within herself. What do you think she's going to thrive with in a partner? Somebody who wants a more broad, novelty seeking, all the time experience, or somebody who themselves is going to want to go deeper? Now, that doesn't guarantee that then together they're going to be able to go deep together, but it's going to set up the odds of that happening successfully. It's going to help if she finds someone who has their own version of being willing to go deep individually. So again, and again, one's not better than the other, but they are quite different. Are you broadening your own experience of the world and therefore sacrificing the depth? Now, some people can do a little bit of both, right? I can broaden and go deep within those broad interests. Or am I somebody who really likes to go deep, but I keep connecting with these people who are just novelty seeking all the time, and I wonder why I'm not satisfied after new relationship energy wears off? Okay, Andrea, thanks.
Yeah. That's kind of it that I have for this. And again, like psychedelics are not for everyone, and the research continues to show so much fascinating growth in this field in really like human potential, right? And so something to look into if you're not familiar with it. Please reach out if you want to talk more um, about it. But the next part is the conversations for healing. So, we talked about some of the Gottman stuff. We talked about some reflective listening. What do you think are the most powerful conversations as like if a couple or a triad comes into your practice and they're really stuck? Like, what are the conversations that you think would be the most helpful for them as again, like kind of getting to a place of goodness and healed.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think really why anybody who's coming to my practice in a relationship context, who's bringing their relationship into therapy, it's are we having the right conversations for us And if they are, meaning the topics, what are we talking about? Right. So and then there's the other thing of, okay, once we figure out what we need to be talking about, literally, how do we do it better? Right. So one of the things in relationship therapy that we used to think 20 years ago is that if we just all became better communicators, that it would automatically help the relationship, right? I'm tempted to do a show of hands online. I mean, like somebody shoot something in the comments. If you have ever thought that or been told that, I just need communication skills, right? That was the trope for the longest time in couples therapy. What we learned, I got a heck yes already, right? What the Gottmans taught, and now let me tell you who the Gottmans are. They're a married couple who have done all the research and then use that research to teach clinicians like me the actual behaviors and practices that promote high relationship satisfaction and promote disintegration of the relationship, right? So they know, I mean, John got notoriety on the old Oprah Winfrey show for being able to predict divorce after observing a couple for like 10 minutes. He could predict divorce or not to like a 96% certainty. And it's not because he was some, magician. It was because he and grad students had coded behavior of people in relationships in a literal apartment that they had wired for observation. And they had watched them weekend after weekend and then followed up with them over years. So he knew the data. He knew what would blow up the relationship. He knew what would promote good ones. So, okay. So yeah, we got yes, 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 better communication skills. There are four behaviors, communication behaviors that will kill your relationship. So, knowing that there are four relationship behaviors that will kill the relationship, if I, as an unwitting couple therapist, teach you to be a better communicator and you are critical, contemptuous, or defensive, or a stonewaller, which you now see is like this. I'm sorry, Andrea, were you saying something? You know, if if you had in your relationship criticism, contempt, stonewalling, and defensiveness, and I taught you to do it better, what happens? I actually speed the demise of the relationship. So being a better communicator, meaning how do we communicate, is dangerous if you are saying the wrong things, right? So the right conversations to be having are these. We had it the other day. So the foundational communication to be having is, what's going on with you in your internal world? What are you stressed about? Who's your best friend? Who do you have a crush on? What are you worried about? What are you most excited about? She and I do this all the time. We talk a lot. I didn't know her biggest stressor until I asked the question, what are you most worried about right now? Not a week ago, not a month ago, not a year ago, but right now.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so that's one thing. Talk about those things. Talk about respect and admiration.
Hmm.
If you think something good about your partner or your friend or your coworker, tell them. Don't let a happy thought about another person go by without it being articulated, at least via a text. Right? So communicate respect and admiration. That builds the relationship bank of any kind. And y'all, it takes about 7 compliments to make up for 1 complaint. 7 to 1, just to stay even. So those are the conversations worth having. Now you can get into also deeper values and what do you want out of life? What do you want out of non-monogamy? What do you want out of this conference we're going to? Those kinds of things. Because you can get into like the values discussion, but really the values discussion is less important than the love map. Do I know what's going on in your internal world? And respect and admiration. Values is nice, but it's lagniappe, as we say in my home state of Louisiana. It's a little something extra. You're not going to get that in a lot of therapy rooms either, because you're going to get a lot of talk about values and we're in alignment and everything else. And what you're going to find is people of different values can get along great and love each other deeply. And for a long time, if they have good love maps and good expressed respect and admiration, expressed respect and admiration. Okay.
I think that was great. I really appreciate your thoughts on this. You are brilliant. I think the other thing that is missing from that is the time, right? And this is something that I see a lot, and if you're in practice here, or if you are in therapy, you may feel this in your own partnership, is that we don't have time to have these conversations, right? We're busy with the kids, or we have to get up super early and take the train and go to work, or I'm running two businesses and trying to exercise and trying to eat and trying to get 8 hours of sleep a night. Like, it is exhausting to be an adult, right? And these conversations, like setting aside that time, like that is part of the healing. Like that is part of the health of your relationship. And we had my birthday was last month, and I had some friends who were invited, and I was really excited to see her. I hadn't seen her in a really long time. And she texted me maybe an hour after the party started and said, I can't make it. So this is the first time we have had childcare in a month, and we stopped somewhere to get some wine or something in the parking lot, and we've been here for 2 hours talking because we don't have time otherwise. And thankfully, rightfully, she and her partner chose not to come to the party. She's like, we are not in a place to come to the party, but they were not able to necessarily set aside time in their daily life. So then kind of it took over for them when they did have some time, separate from the kiddo, separate from, all the other stressors of the house. And so instead of coming to my birthday party, they instead like worked on a relationship for like 4 hours in a parking lot, which I think is not the best outcome. I don't think the outcome that either of them wanted, but it, to me, really highlights this prioritization of these conversations, right? And for some people, going to therapy once or twice a week might be that time for dedicated conversation. For other people, it might be maybe you go for a walk after dinner every night. Maybe it's you set aside Sunday afternoons for like having a cup of tea and sitting on the porch and talking about each other's feelings and mind maps or love maps. There's a lot for that.
So once you're saying the right things, and she's exactly right. And I love that story of the couple that sacrificed the birthday party to, again, they were going to broaden. They were going to see a lot of more people. They're going to have a lot of social conversations. They're going to meet me for the first time. They chose their relationship to go deeper instead of broadening. And I love that. It's a real life example. And Andrea's exactly right. So if you're saying the right things, respect and admiration, diving into love maps, another one is how well do you manage conflict? Right? Which is what this couple did. They spent the 4 hours resolving a conflict. This is the Gottman data. This isn't Christopher's opinion. 69% of relationship problems are perpetual. 31% are solvable. So rock star relationships are going to thrive if they're having those conversations around conflict where they don't see eye to eye really well. And Andrea's right. You find the time that you can. And a lot of people do use my therapy practice as the time to have those conversations because they're too busy otherwise. And it's a little bit like folks that won't go to the gym if they don't have a trainer sitting there waiting for them. It's like an accountability buddy, right? They know they're going to have the conversation if they come in with me. They just need me to hold the space for them mostly. They don't even need the coaching at this point on how to have the conversation. So dedicated time, Andrew's exactly right. Be realistic with how often you can do it given the constraints of your life. However much time you have, divide it where each person has a chance to be the speaker and the listener. The listener's job is to really pay attention, not be thinking about their response to what they're hearing instead, right? Really listen, really understand their experience of a thing. Because y'all, if you've got a partner, if you've got multiple partners, there are whole other universes over there that are experiencing this moment differently than us, right? So really try to get it. And ultimately, once they've told you the whole story, those are your questions. They're really simple. Is there anything else? No, 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 no. Is there anything else? No, no, no. Is there anything else? No. Okay. What I think I'm getting is no, 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 no. Did I get it? Right? I mean, this takes a while. This takes a while. So have the child care, turn off the screens, all those things, and then switch. So everybody gets a chance to talk about their inner world, their subjective reality, their personal experience. I can't tell you how many people come into my office with their arguments, with supporting documents, screenshots of text messages, audio recordings, and they think I'm Judge Judy, y'all. They're going to say, okay, which version of reality is the true one? And they're so disappointed when I say both. But that's how you go deeper in a relational sense. Once I kind of wrap my mind around, oh, we're not going to see the world the same way. This is what Esther Perel was talking about in New York. She's talking about polarization, right? We're not going to see the world in the same way. If I can get my mind around that and love you anyway, now we can really talk about it. And one of my favorite things about a relationship, and now, that I'm in recovery from my personal challenges, is my world is so much bigger for being in relationship with that human. I have seen things, learned things, tasted things, smelled things that I never would have without her. I would have been fine in my life without her, but my world would be so much smaller. There's the expansion.
It's mostly the kale, right? I know it's the kale that you love so much. And all the fucking herbs and weird shit that's in our kitchen. I know it.
Not,
Um,
it's not untrue.
it's not untrue. Okay, so conversations for growth. So again, as I think about Christopher and therapy, and once we get these baseline kind of communication practices, conversations, awareness, connection with our partner taken care of, how do we get bigger, right? Here's some of the ways. So one of the things that a lot of people don't talk about, that I spend a lot of time talking about with my partner, with my friends, with my clients, is conversations about sex, right? And if we go back to the very beginning of this talk where we talked about like, why do people, kind of first get together? It's because, oh, we're hot, or we have really good chemistry, or, we have the same job and we see each other every day. So we build this kind of chemistry, right? We start from these foundations that may work for a while. But if we don't have the bigger conversations about what do you really like? What kind of sexual relationship do you want? What kind of sexual dynamic do you want, right? Like, are we monogamous? What does monogamous mean, right? Do you want to have sex every day? What does sex mean? Right? Like, sex can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So really getting to some basics. And we talked about this a lot in our workshop last month about sexless partnerships, which was, how do we define sex, and what does it mean when we're not having it? And if we only have kind of one definition of sex and we're not doing that one thing, like, that can be a problem. But if we have a lot of different ways to have sex, right? Like, it's also taking a shower together. It's also having a sweet conversation in the living room and drinking tea while we maybe kiss a little bit. Like, that could also be sex, right? So really figuring out like what sex is for you, what it is for your partner, what your agreements are around sex and pleasure and masturbation and monogamy and relationship agreements. And is it okay to fantasize? And is it okay to watch porn? Like, there are so many questions that so many people don't talk about. And that can lead us to kind of, this stuckness or this sexlessness, again, which can be lots of different ways, but really finding like what you want and who you are as a sexual person is so much a part of this growth. Again, my ethos is that sexual healing is part of our wellness journey, right? So this is not, I'm going to get all my sleep and get all my vegetables and go to therapy and do yoga, and then I will, have the sex life of my dreams. Like, building the sex life of your dreams and the pleasure practices is part of that healing, right? So I'm going to drop a workbook in here. I have that set and ready to go. This is a workbook that I created for a workshop that I did a couple of years ago that has questions about, what was your favorite sexual experience? What is a fantasy you've always had? What is something that you think about our dynamic that you want to improve? And it gets you, it's about a 20-page document, and it gets you thinking about sex, intimacy, connection, play, pleasure in all these different ways. So as of right now, it is public on Patreon. Sometimes they block my stuff and require members only because it's too spicy. So as of right now, it's public. And if it changes, apologies in advance for the censorship. So that is a big part of how we grow and how we expand sexually, right? Like, this is part of our growth. And as Christopher says, the part of this deepening together, right? One of the other things that I love to encourage people to try are like little conversation decks. And there's a bunch of different ones that we like. Esther Perel has a game that she created that has just different conversation prompts, right? And those are super helpful. We take them when we go to brunch or when we go on dates. We've taken them on first dates before with other people. We take them sometimes when we go on holiday because it just gives you a chance to have a different type of conversation that you wouldn't normally have. And we were talking with a therapist friend at the event last weekend, and she was like, I love cards like this. I prescribe them to people all the time, and people get really defensive. Like, this is stupid. Like, we shouldn't have to have cards to figure out what to talk about. And it's like, well, you're not having conversations otherwise, or you're just having the same conversations about the kids and about work and about stress. Like, this is how you expand your conversations and start to know your partner's inner and outer world in a different way. So the ones that I like are called the Skin Deep. And then Where Should We Begin is the game, right? I think that's the name of the,
I think it's her podcast and her game, I think.
yeah, I think that's the name of the game.
And by the way, it's worth us saying at this point, we have no financial relationships with these folks. We have no disclosures to make about financial conflicts. This is just stuff we use.
Stuff we love.
Yeah, and then y'all, I did drop a bunch of, and I literally did a cut and paste off a Gottman Institute web post or blog post rather about love map questions. So there was a question in the chat about, hey, a quick primer on love maps. So, and I know with, God knows we're all living in the age of social media rumors that we can't verify or trust. So I used to use the Barack and Michelle Obama example because there was a time where we just held them up as this kind of really idealized relationship. And now, the social media has raced to the bottom of the brainstem with them too. That being said, I will still talk about an interview answer I saw when Barack Obama was asked about Michelle, to paraphrase him, which is always, a less articulate, beautiful way of speaking, he said, I never forget that there's an entire universe over there in that human being that I've only begun to understand. So that to me is the love map. The love map is my internal understanding of Andrea. Is my understanding of Andrea, the human being, up to date or not? That's my responsibility to keep it up to date, right? So I have a love map in psychodynamic psychotherapy, in which I am trained and just have been practicing for over 20 years. The idea is called object relations, right? So I carry around an internalized version of Andrea in my heart. I can hear her talking to me when she's not here, right? This is part of the healing power of relationships, by the way, is it's called an introject to get really nerdy and jargony. We internalize this person that then creates a corrective emotional experience in our hearts if we needed them from those adults who raised us, right? So am I keeping my internal Andrea up to date with what the real Andrea in the real world is going through? So that's a love map. It's my internal version of Andrea that I carry in my heart. And am I keeping that up to date? This is where we often get in trouble with exes that we don't see anymore because my internalized version of my ex gets stuck in amber when the relationship ends, usually. I no longer keep it up to date anymore. I have no idea what that real person is going through. But God, that person that was, still lives in me. I still have a love map of that person, for better or worse. So that's what a love map is. It's my internalized version of the other person. And if I'm in an active relationship, it's on me to keep that version as up to date as possible. That means conversation. Andrea, go.
Great. Um, so the next part is our practices for healing. So I have definitely a list of different practices for growth, and a lot of this focuses on the sensual and the sexual. And I'd love to hear what you would say about kind of practices for healing. Like, what do you recommend for your clients, for your struggling couples? What do you purposefully and maybe surreptitiously include into our partnership that is a practice for healing, so that people who are maybe struggling a little bit in their partnership, like, what can they integrate today to kind of bring in more of this healing?
So, in full disclosure, I was looking at the chat and I saw a comment there, and so I missed the front end. Are we talking about healing for the individual, for the relationship, or either one?
Yeah, both.
Okay, so and just so I understand, so this is reflective listening. Did I get it right? Well, what you would really like me to say is practices that I assign to individuals for their own sort of connection with their own body and embodiment, or connection with other in partnership. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I think both is good.
Okay, is there anything else?
No.
Okay. So y'all, there it is. I mean, right. And it's not always as hard as it sounds, right? I mean, like any of these new practices, once you do them, it's like driving a car. If anybody remembers what it was like when you first started to drive, and I'm checking my mirrors all the time, am I intending to, and all this stuff. And now I just drive and I don't think about those things, but I still do them. These habits are the same. So, to get into practices, one of the things, and Andrea said it, y'all, that as a talk therapist, one of the gaps in my service offerings, if you will, my healing modalities, if you will, is I will talk and talk and talk and listen and listen and listen. But at some point, we have to get our bodies involved. And as a certified sex therapist, it is really on me to then start prescribing things to people to get their bodies involved. So I'll just use myself as an example. For an individual, I needed a practice for my body. Now, I did a lot of exercise in my past as an antidepressant, a natural antidepressant. It was one of the biological interventions I did. But when I started to get into healing, I really wanted to start doing body-based practices to get my body involved so that I could become, my goal was to become a more pleasure filled and erotic human being. It remains that for me. That's one of my personal goals and my thriving and expansion. So, y'all, what I did at the age of 50, actually 49, I started training to be a distance athlete. And I had never done that in my life. I had never run unless somebody was chasing me up until that point. So I decided to start running half marathons and marathons for a number of reasons, but one of the primary reasons was to have a body-based practice. What does it feel like? How does my body respond? How can I really get attuned to this instrument? Okay, so having some sort of body-based activity that you use as a mindfulness practice, meaning I'm tuning into this to see how it feels, right? So I would prescribe that, and I would prescribe that to couples too. Is there the OG in the sex therapy world is something called sensate focus, where Virginia Johnson invented this with of Masters and Johnson's fame, you know, Master and Johnson fame. Um, it's non-genital based touch to start. Genital based touch, follows eventually in this protocol. But you start giving touch to the other person, and the receiver's job is to stay mindfully focused on that experience and see what it evokes in their body and in their brains, and then to narrate that to others. So that's the other thing I prescribe a lot to my couples. Y'all narrate what is happening. Narrate your emotions, narrate those sensations. One, it can be hot. This is, another talk on dirty talk. If you don't know how to do it, and I'm shy by nature, so it's kind of hard for me. So whenever I struggle about what dirty thing to say, rather than thinking about the porn I watched as a child and what would they say, and y'all, it was mostly good, fuck, I don't want to say that. That's not sexy. I want to narrate what's happening in me. When you touch me this way, in this place, it is hard for me to think because all I can feel is the goosebumps that raise up on my left leg and now traveling down to my toes. Okay, that's narrating, and watch and look for the reaction it causes. Right. So tune into your internal experience. Have a body-based practice. I've never been a good meditator, so my running actually is my meditative practice. A lot of times, it's also my processing time. It has a lot of benefits for me. And again, I'm not here to promote running. I have no financial affiliations with running, as big running isn't paying me any money. But have a body-based practice that you focus on and then learn to narrate that, what's happening in you, first to yourself and then to your partners. So, Andrea, did I give you what you needed?
Yeah.
Did I give you anything you wanted? Just checking. You don't have to answer that. Remember, somebody just because somebody asks you a
I
question
think my
doesn't mean you have to
blushing
answer
answers that. So
it.
yeah, I try and remind him how what a powerful narrator he is and what it's like when he whispers in my ear or says something really sexy or uses his breath. And I think sometimes you don't quite believe me. And then we'll have a moment like this where we'll be in public and he'll do something and I'll be like, oh my God. So there's that. So that's real in real time. Um, So when we think about practices for growth, and I covered a little bit about this because it's all connected, right? Practices for growth, if we think about like deepening our experience of sexual pleasure and our bodies and exploring our orgasmic capacity, like most of us have just barely touched the surface of our orgasmic capacity. I have an entire like range of orgasmic capacity now that I did not have 5 years ago. And that is because this is my practice. This is my work with myself, with Christopher, with other people, with toys, is to really like figure out what is possible, right? So, one way to do that is to really dedicate yourself to a pleasure practice. Do you make space and time and prioritization for your own body? And again, this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, masturbate every day, but do you give yourself time and space to nap when you need to nap? Do you go to the bathroom when you need to go pee? Do you listen to your body's cues when you're hungry? Do you give yourself over to pleasure when you're starting to feel it? And this is my particular growth edge right now, is because for so long sex was very transactional, isn't exactly the right word because I wasn't being paid, but it was expected, right? And so I never really got to feel emergent desire. I never got to feel when I really wanted something. And so sometimes now when I feel it, I don't always, it sometimes comes out sideways, right? And so the other morning we were having a conversation and we were drinking tea in the morning and I started like petting him and I was getting really touchy, and he finally came up to me in the kitchen a few minutes later and he said, "You're getting pretty grabby. Like, do you think it's time for sex?" Like, oh, yeah, probably. Right? So that is to say, like, this is an ongoing process, right? Not in the way that we are broken and we need to constantly be fixing ourselves. That is not the message I want y'all to take away today, but that there is really so much to explore. And hopefully that exploration feels fun, right? And again, not everybody feels that way. But if you're here listening to us and you've been listening to us now for an hour, you probably are interested in that expansion, right? So it starts with yourself. So much like Christopher said, kind of the healing starts with yourself in that kind of self-awareness, that embodiment. The pleasure and the deepening also starts with yourself. And when I work with couples to reimagine the possibilities of sex and sexual partnership, I start with the one person, right? Like, what is your relationship to pleasure? What is your relationship to your body? What is your experience of shame and stigma and pleasure in your body? How do we map those things out for ourselves? And then how do we bring that into partnership? And for those that are really, wanting more, if we want to kind of continually grow, we could pick one path, right? Maybe it's BDSM, and you're like, I want to try ropes, and now I want to try restraints, and I really want to try needle play, or I really want to try latex, whatever you're into. I love this for you. There's a million things to explore under the umbrella of kink or BDSM. Maybe it's Tantra and sacred sexuality. And next month, we'll start to share some of these practices. We'll do them live and then we'll guide you into them, whether you're single or with a partner. How do we start to touch this, the cosmic and the sacred within sexuality? And maybe you want to explore your sexuality more generally. Maybe you want to explore sex with people of the same gender. Maybe you want to explore sex with other people in a non-monogamous or a group sex type of construct. There are so many different pathways to take, and there's no one way that's right for everyone. Some of us want to take all the pathways and do all the things all the time. So, there's a lot going on.
Broad and deep for
Broadcast
some. Yeah, yeah,
indeed.
yeah.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of different conversations we have around here around like growth. And also that's not for everyone, right? But I heard a teacher that I really love one time talk about like if if you're curious, you're not going to get bored with sex. Because again, there's tantra, there's BDSM, there's power dynamics, there's non-monogamy, there's exploring your sexuality, there's self-pleasure practices, there's a billion different toys you could buy to experience pleasure in different ways. So, all that to say, there are multiple different pathways to explore, and no one is better than the other. And you may start on one and decide to shift to another one, and you may come back to it and you may play in that for a little bit. But all of that to say, like there is a lot of different practices. So the sensate practice that Christopher mentioned is one of them, and that's in the workbook I dropped in already. It's the Conscious Couples workbook. There are some other practices in this next one that I'm going to drop in, and then I'll also drop in a third one because feeling generous and spicy. This is an erotic massage workbook, and again, everything should be public. You may need to join as a member, which you can join as a free member to get some of these. On
But
my
you don't have to
Patreon.
join as a free member.
You can also pay. But yeah, these are free in as much as Patreon doesn't censor them, which sometimes happens randomly when I update them. So one is a sexual workbook, which is to help you explore, again, fantasy, exploration of what you want, what you need. There's a yes, no, maybe list in there, which is what are the things you really want to try? What are the things you might be willing to try? What are the things you want to try, but only in fantasy? I really love the idea of group sex, but I'm a germaphobe, so I don't want to do that in real life. I only want to do it in my fantasy, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to play with it, and we're going to watch pornography that includes multiple people, but we're never going to do it in real life. Like that is still important and valid to explore. The second one I dropped in is an erotic massage workbook. So this is something that you could do today. It has directions for erotic massage for a cock and erotic massage for pussy. We've taught this live, we've taught this online. It's a very, very fun way to start to explore sensual touch in a completely different way than how most of us approach sex. So I really invite you into that as a very specific practice for yourself or for your beloved, and see what comes up as you start to slow down, as you start to explore the energy, as you start to try new things together. What might open up for you in any one of these experiences? Yes, love.
So I'm going to add on to what you're saying and buy you a little bit of time to read this comment that came up a few comments ago above what you dropped.
Mhm.
So you can work that into our conversation. And I'm going to add on to what Andrea is saying. Now, this goes back to, okay, keep in mind what we're talking about today. We're talking about healing, and I gave you the Gottman model of the rock star relationship, right? So I have a good love map. I'm expressing respect and admiration. I'm managing conflict well. There's some other things in the rock star relationship model, but if you've got those three, you are on your way. What the Gottmans left out of their model, in my opinion, is sex. So when we start talking about expansion, one of the things that often brings couples to my sex therapy practice is desire discrepancy. So as Andrea was talking, and y'all, I can feel her. Can you feel her? Where she starts to go. Some of us want to explore everything, and some of us want to get deep. So she is that person who can be novelty seeking and deep, right? If she lands with somebody who wants what we would call in psychodynamics good enough sex life, which might mean sex once a week in kind of the same dance that we always do, right? Which again, no shame to people for whom that is their sexual aspiration, right? As far as it goes. It's not particularly erotic, right? So keep in mind, I think the Gottmans left sex out of the conversation, which led me to Esther Perel, which led me to Marty Klein, which led me to Ian Kerner, which led me to the Sexual Health Certificate Program at University of Michigan, which led me to ASEC, which led me to certified sex therapist certification. She is dropping, because she is feeling spicy today, A lot of communication skills. If you want to start talking about sex, so this is beyond love maps, this is beyond respect and admiration, do the yes, no, maybe list together. And then hold space for the different erotic universes that exist between you and your partners. What do you want? Where are your limits? What might you want to explore? Same for me. These may be questions you never asked yourself, much less another human. Now she's giving you the possibility for expansion. So a lot of people, when they come into my office virtually for sex therapy, they have desire discrepancy, and usually somebody gets cast in these roles. Somebody is the higher desire partner, somebody is the lower desire partner. And what do they mean usually when they come into my office with that? I want to have sex 5 times a week. They only want to have sex once a month. They talking about numbers, y'all. They're not talking about the kind of experience they're having together in those quantitative wishes, 5 times a week versus once a month. Not always, but sometimes what I will find is the lower desire partner. It's not that they have lower desire for great sex or great orgasms or great erotic experience. They have low desire for the sex they're having. So that is a set of conversations. If you can use the tool she's dropped into the chat, that might keep you out of my sex therapy practice, right? So that's another really good thing. If you communicate the right way without criticism, contempt, I mean, calling somebody a lower desire partner is closet criticism, in my opinion, right? So again, if you can have those relationships, I mean, I'm sorry, those conversations well, those may keep you out of a sex therapist's office for desire discrepancy. Okay, Andrew, to you in the comment that we got in the chat.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome comment, and I want to get to it, but I want to kind of just wrap us up, and then we'll take that into the Q&A for the next 15, 20 minutes or so. So
Great.
that will conclude kind of the lecture portion. And now I want to open it up to all of you. So thank you everyone for being here.